First up is how to guarantee applying Hexblade's curse on every single attack and raising an Accursed Spectre from the corpse every single time you slay an enemy. The Accursed Spectre is incredibly cool, and guaranteeing raising it every single time will take your Hexblade Warlock to the next level. To do this, all we need to do is guarantee Hexblade's curse is applied on every single hit. Baseline, once you cast Bind Hexed Weapon, there's about a 20% chance of it applying Hexblade's curse to your target. However, each time you cast Bind Hexed Weapon, it causes you to gain another 20% chance to apply Hexblade's curse. This means if you cast Bind Hexed Weapon 20 times, you virtually guarantee applying the curse on every single hit. Hexblade's curse is amazing to have because that means it's a permanent increased chance to critically hit, and once you get Accursed Spectre at level 6 Hexblade Warlock, you'll guarantee raising an Accursed Spectre on every kill where you have a reaction to use. Of course, that means you can only get one Accursed Spectre per turn unless you have Duelist's Prerogative, which grants another reaction, but that is still an amazing upgrade for something that would happen much more infrequently. Bind Hexed Weapon can be acquired as a level 1 Hexblade Warlock, making it an amazing class to dip one level into for any class, especially since Hexblade's curse is applied by any damage, even Magic Missile, for example. And next up is a hidden change with Tavern Brawler. Patch 8 enabled Tavern Brawler to work with wild shapes in honor mode once again, but what the notes didn't mention is that Tavern Brawler now applies its bonus damage to all damage dealt while wild shaped, not just unarmed attacks, which includes spell damage. For example, if you cast Spike Growth and then go into a wild shape, you'll then cause the Spike Growth to deal bonus damage equal to your strength modifier every time a creature moves within it. Depending on your strength modifier, this can add 4 to 5 damage to every single Spike Growth damage tick, which can really add up. Another example, while wild shaped as an Earth Myrmidon, not only does the bludgeoning damage gain your strength modifier, but also the thunder damage. This means with extra attack and improved extra attack, a Moon Druid can deal about 120 damage per turn with Tavern Brawler, assuming the target doesn't have resistances, because unfortunately Primal Strike is still bugged. Primal Strike is a level 6 Circle of the Moon Druid passive feature that makes their beast form attacks count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity. However, damage will still get cut in half if the target has resistance to your wild shape attacks, unfortunately even as of patch 8. However, since Tavern Brawler seems to be added to any spell, this got me thinking about some of the different spells you could use this with. Spirit Guardians, for example, would be really cool. Since owlbears have the highest strength out of all wild shapes, casting Spirit Guardians and then shifting into an owlbear results in +5 to the 3d8 Spirit Guardian damage, which results in one-shotting a lot of enemies just by walking near them. Not to mention this looks amazing, a giant owlbear with Spirit Guardians. Another cool spell I thought to try this out with is Wall of Fire. Obtained at level 7 as a druid, we could still keep Spirit Guardians by putting 5 levels into Cleric. The 5d8 fire damage dealt by Wall of Fire surprisingly did not get Tavern Brawler added to its damage, but the 1d4 burning damage did get a damage bonus from Tavern Brawler. So it looks like it doesn't work for every single spell, but it's amazing that it works for Spike Growth, Spirit Guardians, and Earth Myrmidon's Grounded Thunderstrike, and probably even more. And next up is a hidden interaction with Toll the Dead that makes it hit every single target in a huge AoE. Toll the Dead is a new cantrip added in patch 8 that deals 1d12 necrotic damage or 1d8 if the target is at full health. This cantrip can be learned by clerics, warlocks, wizards, and death domain clerics as a domain spell. So to get Toll the Dead to hit all targets in an AoE, all you need to do is to be at least a level 1 death domain cleric and equip a special set of gloves to make this work. And those gloves are the Gemini Gloves. The Gemini Gloves grant you Adroit Caster, which can be activated to cause your cantrips that target foes and allies to be able to target an additional creature. However, instead of targeting an additional creature, it turns Toll the Dead into an AoE. This works because as a level 1 death domain cleric, you gain Reaper, which is a passive feature that allows the cleric to target 2 creatures with necromancy cantrips. Since Toll the Dead is a necromancy cantrip and Gemini Gloves also lets you target an additional target, this causes Toll the Dead to become an AoE cantrip since, as we all know, 2 + 2 = infinity. This trick already worked for cantrips like Bone Chill, so now that Reaper has been added to the game, it now doubles the effectiveness of Bone Chill, causing it to hit every single target in an AoE twice, which is arguably even better than Toll the Dead. It's absolutely insane damage, and the Gemini Gloves can be bought from Hellsick in Act 3 within Devil's Fee, and only 1 level of Death Domain Cleric is needed to learn the Reaper passive and Toll the Dead. And next up, in patch 8, Deepend Pact of the Blade stacks with extra attack. The extra attack granted to those with Deepend Pact of the Blade or Hexblade Deepend Pact, will stack with other sources of extra attack, such as multi-classing 5 levels into Paladin, Barbarian, or Fighter, for example. One of the patch 8 note updates did mention that this was changed, but somehow it must have been reverted for the final release, as it is currently working and is the only known way to stack extra attacks together, and it is worth noting that this currently does not work in Honor mode, however. And next up is Shadowblade's new secret power. Patch 8 fixed Shadowblade to actually grant advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscured targets when using this blade. However, instead of just attack rolls with this blade, it's causing all attack rolls, even spell attack rolls, to have advantage against lightly or heavily obscured targets just by wielding this blade, which is a huge buff, and in some cases can remove the need for risky ring. But that's not all. Shadowblade from the ring and from Shadow Sorcerer now grants proficiency with short swords to the summoner while wielding the blade. That means classes that lack proficiency can now wield the Shadowblade without penalties. Also, the Knife of the Undermountain King has the same Shadowblade feature that has been updated in exactly the same way. Since this blade was already used in so many builds, this is a powerful new buff that's going to make any build using attack rolls while wielding the Knife of the Undermountain King much better. And the Shadowblade ring can be acquired from Arabella by completing the quest Find Arabella's Parents in Act 2, and the Shadowblade spell can be learned by sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, arcane tricksters, and eldritch knights. And next up is a secret change to Jhannyl's gloves that now make them secretly OP. The patch 8 notes say twice even that Jhannyl's gloves were fixed as they were not correctly triggering the Defy Villainy passive that casts Lesser Restoration. But what the notes don't say is that Jhannyl's gloves will now make the wearer cast Lesser Restoration to clear negative conditions an infinite number of times, whereas previous to patch 8 it would only happen once per long rest. This makes the gloves essentially grant immunity to blindness, paralyzation, poisoned, and bloodless. I tested it during combat, and the instant Astarion applies bloodless to a character with Jhannyl's gloves equipped, it immediately fades even if it's not the wearer's turn. And since Astarion was ascended in this example, he was able to bite again and get the same result, immediately having bloodless cleared. So these gloves are now much better than they used to be. Previously only once per long rest, now as many times as you need. And Jhannyl's gloves can be acquired from Isabel, either by knocking her out or killing her and then looting her. And next up is a patch 8 traitor trick. While it doesn't say in the patch 8 notes, there have been some changes to prevent the Bind Pact weapon traitor trick. You can no longer add the weapon to wares, and it doesn't appear in your inventory when trading with a trader. However, you can still use your pact weapon even after changing classes to get all the items from a trader. All you need to do is equip your Bound Pact weapon, which is ideally something expensive, and then place a weapon in the barter menu. Then drag that weapon in the barter menu on top of your Bound Pact weapon, causing them to switch places. Once done, your Bound Pact weapon can be bartered over and over for all the trader's gold and items. And supposedly, Bind Pact weapon was supposed to be correctly removed when changing class based on patch notes I've read, but it looks like it sticks around even after changing your class in case you want to use this trick as a different class. And next up is an amazing secret interaction between the Hound of Ill Omen and the Accursed Spectre. If you have both minions out at the same time, they actually gain each other's reactions. The Accursed Spectre, when hit, can use Splinter Shadow on itself to create a copy of itself as a reaction, and the Hound of Ill Omen can use right behind you as a reaction when you attack an enemy to teleport behind them. This amazing interaction makes the Shadow Sorcerer Hexblade multi-class much more fun, since your minions are replicating like crazy and teleporting behind your enemies as you attack them. Not to mention, if you use the trick we mentioned earlier to guarantee Hexblade's curse on every attack, you'll be raising an Accursed Spectre on every single kill, which makes this even stronger. The condition for your minions to gain each other's reactions is simply to be within 3 meters or 10 feet of each other at some point, and then both will gain each other's reactions until long rest. It's an amazing hidden reaction, especially if you love summons. And next up is a secret improvement to the Amulet of the Drunkard. Amulet of the Drunkard restores 2 to 8 hit points per turn while drunk. However, prior to patch 8, it only worked on your first turn. Now in patch 8, it correctly applies its healing effect every single turn, which is awesome. This is huge since we now have the Drunken Master Monk. This is a perfect time to include this in your build. The Amulet of the Drunkard also increases the duration of your inebriation by 5 rounds, which is another benefit for the Drunken Master Monk. And to get the Amulet of the Drunkard, you'll need to talk to Hoots Hooligan in Act 3 and agree to try Hoots Hooch. Once done, you can then find this item in the list of items available for trade from Hoots Hooligan. And next up is a secret nerf to Elemental Weapon. Although the tooltip text has remained the same, patch 8 correctly fixes Elemental weapon from granting a +1 enhancement bonus, which grants +1 to attack rolls and damage, as well as 1d4 elemental damage, to now just +1 to attack rolls and 1d4 elemental damage. This is a very minor change of just -1 damage, but it also affects Draconic Elemental Weapon from the very famous Drakethroat Glaive and Elemental Age from the less famous Flail of the Ages. And next up is a hidden interaction with the new Way of the Drunken Monk subclass. In Act 2 within the Arcane Tower, there are arcane turrets, and you might think since these are constructs, they would not be susceptible to the Way of the Drunken Monk. However, you can make these arcane turrets drunk. They even have an animation for being drunk. They sort of fold up and then have bubbles above them. This drunkenness gives them disadvantage on dexterity and charisma checks, so next time they try to persuade someone, it's not going to work as well. And frankly, it is another strange interaction with these arcane turrets that you really would not expect. And next up is a new method for infinite spell slots as a Shadow Sorcerer. Nimbus, the Hound of Ill Omen, can inflict omens of different damage types. Then as the Sorcerer, if you deal that damage type to the target with that condition, the omen is consumed and you gain a sorcery point. To do this an infinite number of times quickly, just use Nimbus to attack Gale at camp when he's not in your party. He'll get the omen, and then you can use the damage type required to gain a sorcery point. And what's great about Gale is that he'll automatically heal himself to full, and you can repeat this over and over. Now granted, this is not the fastest method to gain sorcery points, and you'll need to make sure you have all the different damage types available on your Sorcerer in order to make this as quick as possible, but it is possible to load up on sorcery points this way, and therefore infinite spell slots. And next up is a hidden interaction with Dirty Trick Sand Toss. This swashbuckler Dirty Trick is secretly an unarmed attack and therefore benefits from Tavern Brawler. Looking at the combat log, Tavern Brawler is granting your strength modifier to the attack roll, but unfortunately it is not adding your strength modifier to the damage roll. However, because Dirty Trick Sand Toss is an unarmed attack, maybe there is a monk or thrower swashbuckler build possible with this knowledge. And next up is a hidden interaction with Flicko the Wrist. This swashbuckler Dirty Trick flicks your weapon at a target and possibly disarms them. It then grants advantage on your next attack. However, what this weapon action doesn't mention is that it works with Great Weapon Master, meaning you can use a weapon that requires 2 hands to wield and deal a bonus 10 damage. And luckily, there are 2-handed finesse weapons that will scale with your dexterity instead of strength if it is higher, such as Falara Luve, which means that your Dirty Trick Flicko the Wrist will gain a bonus 10 damage and will deal sneak attack damage, which as of patch 7 also benefits from the Savage Attacker feat. Savage Attacker allows you to roll your damage dice twice and use the highest result. Savage Attacker also works with Great Weapon Master's bonus damage, and really to sum this all up, a swashbuckler wielding a 2-handed finesse weapon with Great Weapon Master and Savage Attacker using Dirty Trick Flicko the Wrist after casting Falara Luve Shriek is amazing for both solo and group play because you can deal a lot of damage on your turn while disarming an enemy without feeling like you wasted your action using Shriek. And next up is how to get infinite reactions. This can be done as a giant barbarian equipped with Duelist Prerogative and Vest of Soul Rejuvenation. All you need to do is use Giant's Rage, then Elemental Cleaver, and throw your weapon until all your actions are used up. Then go cause an opportunity attack on yourself, and if it misses, which is a must in order for this to work, you will use your Greater Kushigo counter as a reaction. This will actually grant you an extra attack, allowing you to throw your weapon again, and for some reason, your reactions are also reset after doing that, letting you cause another opportunity attack and another Greater Kushigo counter, which allows you again to do another throw, and you can do this over and over for as much movement speed as you have and as many misses that you can get out of your enemies, since Greater Kushigo counter can only be used as a reaction after an enemy misses you. So this is incredibly strong since getting nearly infinite reactions and infinite throws means infinite damage, but it is held back by how much move speed you have and how much AC you have, since your enemies do need to miss you. But if you are able to pull this off, you can get out a ton of damage as a giant barbarian.